Well, hello, hello, hello. It's your girl, Sean LeRae, and welcome back to Boss Talk LA. That's bold, one of a kind, sensational superstars, and that's you. So it's Wednesday, y'all, and you know that is hump day. And what I always like to know is what you are doing to help you make it through to the weekend. Because here at Boss Talk, we love the weekends. So for me, I'm traveling yet again, and I love it. We're going to Texas over there in Houston. So I'm excited about that. A new business endeavor that I'm involved in, and we're having a little powwow over in Houston. So I'm excited about that. So tell me what's going on in your great big old world. I'd love to know. So I think one of the things that I'm excited about is just the trajectory of mental health. And so tonight we are going to have an opportunity to talk about just that. Because as you know, mental health has not been a topic that has been at the dinner table of most families, Black families or other families of color. And there have been multiple reasons for that, some of which we don't trust. We have kind of most families grew up understanding that what you say in this house stays in this house, kind of the whole Vegas flavor on that topic. And then there's the fact that most people of color don't trust the professionals that are highlighted as mental health professionals because they don't look like them. And so there's always the idea that the person that they go to see might not understand them, might judge them, might say things that might upset them in some way. And just really not feeling like you're understood or that they get you. And that's been a huge thing. But lately, I see more and more people of color, particularly Black people, going to therapy. And the other beautiful piece to that is that I see more and more Black people doing therapy. So for me, that is very exciting. And as you all know, I had the distinct honor and pleasure to be a part of the Not Your Typical Psychotherapy Conference, held in London, England, the United Kingdom, back in September. And in that time that I got to spend there, one of the most amazing and heartfelt and beautiful takeaways, as I will call it, was, it's that time again. I want y'all to go ahead and give a shout out right now to my amazing agent of my song, and brought her a lot of landscapes. Y'all can do with that. Thank you. So, as I was saying, we're going to talk about mental health, and y'all know that's one of my favorite topics. So, I want you to take this time, please go and share the link. Anybody that you think needs to be here, and that's everybody. So please go and share the link out and ask if you like private definitely share. So I'm going to let you take this time and go and get your people. Go and get people in here, because this is going to be a great topic. My guest tonight is quite a delight, and so I know that you're going to love her. So I want you to get out there and share. All right. So again, I thank you, Wayne, and I thank you, Alana. All right. So as I was saying before, one of the things that I love most about the travels that I get to do, the traveling that I get to do, and the places I get to visit are the people. And so when I was in London, there were great speakers, there were great opportunities to learn about new, innovative, and exciting things in the therapeutic world. But my favorite parts were the after session uh, uh, powwows that we had outside in the lobby of the hotel. So on day one, I met a little firecracker, is what I like to call her. And I have invited her to join us on Boss Talk today, but I want to take just a minute and tell you a little bit about her. So I'm going to grab her bio and do just that, provided I can find it. Aha. So, Dr. Janelle Perkins Muhammad is a psychotherapist, licensed family therapist, and a South Carolina state supervisor with more than 20 years of experience in relationship and life coaching. She's a graduate of the University of Maryland and Capella University. I almost said a cappella because y'all know me. So, Dr. Janelle is a board member of Charleston Hope, an organization that increases access to mental and behavioral health programs in Title I schools to enhance student well being. As an adjunct professor at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, and practicum supervisor for Capella and Liberty University, she focuses on building a new generation of culturally competent for the majority. Culturally competent clinical counselors. Dr. Janelle was Foundation Fellow of Roper St. Francis Hospital. She has been an entrepreneur for the majority of her life and utilizes these skills to coach fellow entrepreneurs who aspire to develop and grow legacies. So, y'all, I'll tell you a little bit more about her and you'll learn more as we go on tonight. But now, without another word from me, please welcome to Boss Talk, Dr. Janelle Perkins Muhammad. Hey,
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me.
absolutely. And thank you for being here. It's good to see you this
You
evening.
too.
Yes, this is our first connect since, our first visual connect.
Visual Connect. Yes.
Right, right. Since we left the United Kingdom.
Yes, that was a wonderful time. I believe you were maybe the first person that I met in the lobby
Yes, I think
because I
so.
walked up and looked at that beautiful bag that you had. I had to say hello, but I figured
Oh,
we must be there
yes.
for the same purpose.
Exactly, exactly. So, I just spoke about how the trip impacted me. I thought it was
Mm.
beautiful. I thought it was wonderful, and my favorite piece was meeting all of the people. What did you take away from that trip, Janelle?
Oh my goodness. I think you're right. It was meeting all the wonderful people. There were some incredible sessions on EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Mhm.
Some really great sessions on how to go about building your practice, right? And how to have those extra income flows that
Yeah,
might not necessarily be the therapeutic side, but other things that you might be able to do. And I think that that was beneficial because there's nothing like if you're going to be a boss, then you got to have your bag together,
yeah,
right?
that
So
is true.
helping us keep that bag together, I think, was really important. But more
Yeah.
than anything, I think it's connection. You know, I'm all
Mhm.
about relationships. And so I believe every encounter, every engagement, and every experience you have with another person is a relationship, period.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we connected in that way because I am the same when it comes to that. And I think
Hmm.
one of the other things, that piece about the multiple ways that you can stream that income in as a clinician and as a coach and all of those things, I think that was
Hmm.
very valuable to all of us. And to see how other people are doing it
Hmm.
is always good because you have your way of doing it and you see what has worked for you and what hasn't worked, but it's good to see and to talk to people to find out, like, how are you doing that, because this is something I ran into and I had this
Hmm.
encounter, and oh, me too. Well, how did you get through it? And those kinds
Hmm.
of things. So I just think that was really great. That
Yeah, it's
was
always good to be learning, constantly learning.
really, a familiar face and voice. Latasha Matthews, my girl
Hey.
from Georgia. Hey, Georgia girl. Welcome to Boss Talk. Welcome back to Boss Talk. So, Latasha is how I ended up getting to London because she told me about the things that Ernesto does and all of the not your typical psychotherapy conferences.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
she's spoken at some, and so that's how I kind of got myself over to London, and we planned it long ago.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah, when we
Like I said, connections are so important.
Mhm.
Relationships is what it's all about.
Absolutely. So tell me, I always like to ask people in our profession, what brought you to the profession?
Oh, well, it's an interesting story, and I'll try to keep it short. My parents were ministers, and they actually were the head of our marriage excellence ministry and our finance ministries. And so over the years, I had this incredible opportunity to watch them counsel people as they came and went through their offices. But I
Mm,
also thought to myself, why do we keep having a number of people come back? There's this recidivism that's occurring, right?
mm,
And what is it that's happening in the space? And what I realized is that we have this really incredible grasp for spiritual things. Like, I don't care if we're hugging trees, putting our feet in the sand, doing a sound bath, or laying prostrate
mm.
before the Lord. Whatever that belief or value system is, we're going to do it to the nth degree.
Yes.
Sometimes, though, it's the natural, practical steps to getting to a new space that has to change that cognitive thinking that is
Come on.
so difficult. And
Yeah.
I said, I'm going back to school to get the theory behind that component
Yeah.
because I'm sure that between our cognitive space, which is our mental and emotional health, and our
Hmm.
spiritual space, which is the beliefs and values that we come to the space with,
Right.
there's a disconnect. And
Yeah.
we got to figure out what that dissonance is.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Now, before we go any further, I want to introduce you to your South Carolina sister.
Hey,
Risa, hello, darling. Thank you. She says, "Hi, ladies. So nice to meet a fellow South Carolinian, and nice to
yes.
see you back." Now, Risa was also a guest on the show,
Oh,
and
awesome.
she and her sister girl, also they're both my sorors, and
Mm.
they work together as global health partners. They
Oh,
work as
wonderful.
global health advocates or patient advocates. So they
Mhm.
wrote a book together called "Putting the Care Back in Healthcare. You're Not Just a Number." How did I do
Mm.
that, Risa? So this was rich, and so she says, if you're going to be a, you said, if you're going to
Mhm.
be a boss, then you've got to have your bag together. And so I just wanted to reiterate that because that was rich. And Latasha says, so good. So
Yeah.
I love your reason. Your why makes so much sense.
Mhm.
And so growing up, who knew, right? That growing up in this ministry in
Yeah.
that way, that you would find a way to give to it, to lend to it, and sort of answer the missing piece,
Right.
you know?
Right. I
That is
think it's
beautiful.
so important to recognize one of my mottos is that the greatest generational wealth we can bestow is emotional and mental wellness.
Mm,
Because without it, we won't have a clue what to do with the millions that are left. We will
that's right.
spend them erroneously. We will, I mean, just do all kinds of things when we are anxious and depressed and trying to figure out how to soothe those ails that we
Mhm.
can't soothe through
Yes.
money.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
So when you went back, what were you doing prior to that?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. I actually, as I said in my bio, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So I was actually running a fairly large entertainment company out of Washington, D.C. President, CEO, founder of the company in and of itself. So we did initially, we started out doing government conferences and large events for corporations, and then moved into some personal things like weddings and so forth.
Ah, yes.
But we grew to have a floral design studio and limousines. We had 26 cars by the time it was all said and done.
Wow.
So I did that for about 10 years, 12 years. In the early years of my life, I guess you could say that is.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, I worked in corporate a bit, but I wasn't a really good employee because I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither. I would
I
look.
mean, I got the work done.
I
Don't
would
get
either
it
quit.
wrong.
I would either quit or get fired, girl, because I just was not interested. It
Well,
was
see, I was never fired, but I had difficulty sometimes because I understood that there was a better way to do a thing, but it wasn't my company. So I couldn't
yeah.
just walk in and create new policy,
Well, see, that's
right?
the piece I missed. I didn't know that
Mm.
I couldn't go in
Oh,
there
you didn't know
and tell
that?
them, "Oh,
Oh,
being a
yeah,
bad
that's
or
probably
get
the
them out
piece where
back."
you went
Yeah,
ahead and
be
said, "I quit
like,
instead of being
"You
fired."
no longer need it," and I'd be like, "Bye," or I would just leave. I have like not returned to jobs.
Mm,
I got hired once, and this was very young. I think I 22 or 23 or so.
mhm,
And I I got hired by a particular corporate company
mm,
that dealt with making copies. And
mm, mm,
I stood in front of their beautiful, great, big old building in New York City. And I just looked at the building, and my mom had come to town about me this beautiful blue suit, and I was
mm,
ready, girl. And I stood there and I was like, can't do it. And I went and had
mhm,
breakfast.
mhm.
I never walked in there. So
Yeah.
interestingly enough, we have some similarity even in our previous lives because
Mhm,
I too did events.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so I started doing them for others and then I kind of flipped the switch and started doing my own and I loved weddings. So I had especially
mm.
different wedding services.
Okay.
And we did, yeah, I did weddings all over the place. I loved it.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved it, and it's interesting because I think it really flows into what I do, because you can't really help people pull together something as detailed as a government conference for 1,500 people overseas who all need to carry their weapons with them or
Mm,
who need to have Secret Service. You
mm,
can't really do that without being able to truly understand the psychology behind the individuals you're working with,
mm,
right?
mm.
And so not only that, but depending on the number of people you have working for you, and at any given time during our peak season, I could have 110 employees working for me all over the world in one capacity or another. So
Wow.
I eventually had to be thinking from a perspective, and this is, scaling perspective, right? Of I need new offices. So I ended up putting an office in Chicago and I ended up putting an office in Dallas so that we could reach the rest of the country and then the rest of the world more easily. That
Hmm.
again takes us back to what we're going to be talking about, which is the mental health component of it.
Right.
Because now I have to be able to relate to people, be a boss, but not be heavy handed. I have
Mm,
to understand what it is to be disappointed and not necessarily be angry. I have to understand what I need to do in order to help people accomplish the task at hand and get their buy in. That's all relationship building.
hmm. That
So when
is.
I look at that, in the scope of what I'm doing now, it still had a tremendous impact. And I have people who, even today, from all the way back in the 90s, who contact me, and I'm still connected with them in one way or another because I was able to really build those relationships.
Yes, that's important. And I see that you were a boss prior to going into this field, so it makes sense
Hmm.
that you would turn around and leverage that
Hmm.
experience and marry the two. I love.
Yeah. And I think help create bosses, right? I think
Yes, I was
people
just gonna
want
ask.
to be the boss of their environments. They want to happen to life rather than life happening to them. And that is a
Mhm.
boss space to be in too,
It
where you
is.
can
It
set the
is.
appropriate boundaries, where you can let your no be your no and your yes be your yes, where your core beliefs and values are your own and not just what someone else gave you.
Absolutely. And so essentially what you're doing is empowering
Mhm.
people to determine how they want to be in relationship with other
Mhm.
people as well as with entities like their
Mhm.
own jobs if they are corporate and if they're not, if they are not working in C-suite as C-suite execs, but just
Yeah.
wherever, whatever level they show up to show up fully as their authentic selves. And I think that's
Right.
powerful. So
Yeah.
very powerful. Now tell me how you incorporate EMDR because, well, first of all, tell the bus talkers a little bit about Someone loves that statement. Absolutely. So tell me how you take tell a little bit about what EMDR is and then how you use it in your
Sure.
practice.
Yeah, I explain it this way because this is how I explain it to my clients. My practice is about 92% African American. And the minute that you begin to speak about reprocessing anything with eye movement, people think you're going to hypnotize them and that you know they're going to walk outside, hear a certain word and start clucking like a chicken. And that is
Exactly.
not what we're talking about. We're literally talking about the fact that for many people, and particularly African American or BIPOC communities, which is Black, Indigenous, and people of color, so in those communities, there's a lot of trauma that has been experienced in one way or another.
Mm,
And what we're doing is literally taking the opportunity to say, let's discuss that trauma. Let's now um, adjust the narrative for that trauma. And that's done by the neurological system. So the eye movement and desensitization goes hand in hand in order to do some bilateral stimulation, both
mm,
sides of the brain working together in tandem in an effort to reprocess those memories such that there's a better understanding of the fact that it's not something that you had control over. It's
yes.
not your fault. There's not a shame that you have to walk around in, that you are worthy and deserving of love, that you are loved, that you are appreciated.
Mm,
And then people have this incredible opportunity now to see their lives differently because they see that experience differently. It does not mean the experience did not happen.
mhm.
And it does not mean that it wasn't painful.
Yes. I have to tell you, Dr. Janelle, I have never, and I got to say it just like that. I can't say never. I have never, ever heard that explained so beautifully and so concisely and so clearly. So thank you for that. Now, I
You're
am not
most welcome.
currently an EMDR practitioner. I plan to be, but I have been trained in brain spotting
Mhm.
and similar
Very much so.
in terms of the outcome and the way that it uses the neurological system to kind
Mhm.
of reprocess. I love
Mhm.
it so much, but I think that it's important, like you said, for people to understand that this is not voodoo, this is not some magical thing, that you
Mhm.
get to do the work. It's your own body, your own system that
Mhm.
is orchestrating the work for you in such a way that it releases you and frees you from all of
Mhm.
that trauma. So
Yeah.
since we said that word, and Risa
Mhm.
likes that too, as I see, she said yes. But since we use that word trauma, I know that a lot of your work, as is mine, is trauma related, and
Mhm.
in working with BIPOC communities and helping us release and undo some of the trauma that comes with LWB, living while Black, and
Mhm.
and just the social injustices, but not only what is happening now, but what happened historically and the historical
Mhm.
trauma and the intergenerational trauma and all of that. So, speak to how you work with those things in your practice and in your coaching and that sort of thing.
Well, it's interesting because I once had someone ask me if a couple walks into my office, if the first thing I say to them is, "Oh, you're dealing with these things because there's racism around us, and therefore everything you've ever dealt with in your life is because of slavery and so forth." And no, that's not what I do.
No.
What I do recognize is that there are ways in which we interact as a people. There are ways in which we think as a people. There are ways in which we respond to what's happening around us that are directly connected to how that trauma impacted generations before us. So I'll
Hmm.
give you an example. Oftentimes, when I have clients come in who are depressed, but don't want to say they're depressed and don't want to, in any way whatsoever, accept that depression is a word that they could possibly be using in their lives.
Right, as it relates to them.
Mhm. Now they know people depressed and they've seen
Right,
people spell depression, but it doesn't
right.
have anything to do with them.
Yeah.
So
Cooking
what
it.
we end up doing is talking about how, in all actuality, back in slave times, depression existed. But
Mm-hmm.
what happened was, instead of demonstrating that depression, we put on the right clothes, got in our Sunday's best when it was time to go to church, put on the nicest hat we could find, the biggest one, right? We
Mm-hmm.
could find. And that was all in an effort to cover up the layers of depression. We weren't talking about the fact that you
Yes.
had just been raped the night before, 2 days before, by your master. Weren't talking about the fact that you were whipped or beaten, or that your the maiden of the house burned you in some way. You didn't talk about those things, but
That
they
your
still
man
had
was
an
taken
impact.
and sold off.
Right,
That
that
your
your
children.
family, children, or your family members were
Mhm.
sold off. You weren't talking about those things. You were covering them up
Right.
by layers of clothing, the great big hat, the great big smile, the yes sir, no sir. Not, I'm not telling anybody say don't say yes sir, no sir. That's not what I'm
Yeah.
saying. But it was a blanket to cover those things up so that
Mm.
you could still present yourself as being
Yeah.
holy and
Okay.
acceptable before God.
Mm-hmm.
And
Girl, girl.
so what I do is to help people understand that what we're doing even today is covering that up, because Black women have the highest levels of depression, and it goes undiagnosed,
And anxiety.
and anxiety. And
Yeah.
they coexist, right?
Right.
They look similar,
Mhm.
very similar.
They
So that
dance together, is what I
they
always say.
do.
They
They
dance right
do.
together. Yes. Mr. Seal says he has a comment here. He says, interesting talk about neurological. I
Mhm.
purposely um play, let's see, purposely you play chess with both hands to purposely work both sides of um migraine, or is that the brain? And something
Probably, yeah.
interesting happens. Some of my friends know about it. Um, Give us more detail. Tell us what it is that happened. Don't keep it so.
Well, it's interesting. I think, when we think about the neurological system, we don't think about it as being a part of the nervous system. And the more that you can use hand-eye coordination, the more stabilized and resilient your nervous system becomes, right?
Mm,
And that nervous system now begins to inform you in terms of how your emotions are going to be impacted. So,
mhm.
we could go into I could get all geeky because I can do that in a heartbeat.
Uh-huh.
But we could go into the brain like you wouldn't believe, and talk about the amygdala and the hippocampus and how they're all
Oh yeah,
impacted,
I can go with you right there.
all of that, right? So I could see how, when you're playing chess, you have to be able to be thinking a few moves ahead of the other person, because you got to play for their board and yours, right?
Mm,
So now you mess around and drop that pawn in the wrong spot, it's there. There's
it's
no
done.
going back and moving
It's a done
it.
deal. Right, right, right.
So I can imagine that too is a
Mhm.
way of working through the nervous system's ability to build a resilience, for
Yes,
sure.
absolutely.
Not to
And
mention
it's so
self-care.
great that young people are learning this now. My godfather has a school in Toledo, Ohio,
Mm,
that well, he actually has an organization, and they go into the schools and they teach elementary school, junior high and high school kids how to play chess.
mm,
And what it does, the way that it helps them to critically think and to use both sides of the brain, and to work areas of their brain that they probably don't get to do in some of their school settings, because a lot of times in their school settings they are not expected, so therefore not given work that challenges them in that way.
mm.
So I
That's
think that
unfortunate.
it's a really amazing thing that he does with that. And as you're saying, that William, that you're using both sides of the brain.
Mhm,
That's a nice dance.
mhm,
Absolutely. And
mhm.
we often don't think about the opportunities that we have to do that. Like there are so many that we don't recognize.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that it's really important too to remember that when you're in relationship with someone, that there are opportunities for that bilateral stimulation too. So, my book is about intimacy. So it's Into Me See, Mastering Black Intimacy for the Relationship You've Always Wanted. And
Mm,
so one of the things that I talk about is the ways in which your cognitive and emotional spaces can have that same kind of a dance that's a bilateral stimulation, because you're kind of talking through the situations and circumstances that have happened in the history of an individual and how
mhm.
that was impacting them emotionally. And I actually give a chart of host of emotions. Now, it's not all of them, but it's a host of emotions that you can take the opportunity to look at and see, what was I feeling at that time?
Right,
And again, here we are, bilateral stimulation. So it's not necessarily the same as the hand taps or the clappers or
right.
anything of that nature with eye movement in EMDR. But at the same time, you're using that cognitive and that emotional space in an effort to build a deeper connection.
I
You
love
can
that.
connect on one level, but when you start to mix and mold all of those together, the
Mhm.
cognitive, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical,
Ooh,
bye.
girl. Mm. Now, let's take a little deeper dive. So,
Mm,
tell me about what prompted you to write this book? Was it out of some of the couples you were seeing, some personal experiences? You tell.
a little all that. Okay.
I'm gonna put your book
So,
up right now, though. I do
y-
want to do that.
excellent. Well,
Boss
what's
Talkers, that is where you can get
mhm,
into me. See, help me out with the rest.
mastering Black intimacy for the relationship you've always wanted.
Well, hello, somebody. There's
It's a
there's the
bestseller
link.
on Amazon. I'm telling you,
Yes,
it's good reads.
yes. No,
Every now and again, somebody walks up and they're like, oh my God, I read this chapter this month," and I'm like, "Oh, that was great,"
yes, yes.
But what happened?
I have to confess I haven't gotten it yet, and shame on me because that is one of the first things we talked about. And when you told me that
Hmm.
title, I shared with you that I had the again distinct honor and pleasure to be present with our sister Iyanla Van Zant
Hmm.
in Georgia at the Wonder Woman conference back in
Mm.
2014, and she
Mm.
gave us properties as we entered into the space, and that was who we were known as throughout the week. And
Oh.
it was very spiritual because it was
Hmm.
as though she knew us and gave us these things, these
Hmm.
properties according to who we are, and as I call it, your
Hmm.
who you are-ness. And mine was intimacy, and she
Mm.
said to me, into me,
Into BC,
see.
right?
And
Which
I
is the title of the book.
right, and I was like, oh, ooh,
Yeah.
yeah. So and it was perfect for me at that time, and it
Hmm.
allowed me to take a deeper look into myself
Yeah.
to get
Well,
the
it's
connection I needed.
interesting. I started writing this book probably 20 plus years ago. And initially, it was really the business of marriage, because obviously I'm an entrepreneur, right? So it was the business of marriage, because in some ways the marriage can have transactional components to it,
Mm,
hopefully more relational components than
right.
transactional, but there's a good balance that happens. So I started writing way back then and got waylaid in life, children, spouses,
Mm,
etc.
mm-hmm.
And then I was in a space in my personal life where I stopped and said, okay, what do I want? Because I was busy living the life that someone else wanted. And the things that I needed and was asking for were not a part of my existence.
Mm,
And I said, you know what? I know that all these people that I'm working with to manifest their greatest life, that they're manifesting it because of these principles that I'm giving them. And they can work in this space with me for a period of time, but then they seem to dissipate. Well, what I came to learn later was that my ex husband actually was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder by the US military.
oh,
So I said, okay, I can work with that. Let's figure out how we can't fix it. We know there's no
right.
cure, but we can work with it. He said, no, thank you. I want to remain the way I am, and I want you to remain the way you are. And I said, hmm, Mastering Black intimacy for the relationship you've always wanted. No, sir,
Thank
that's
you
not
for
what
that.
I want.
Mhm.
And so I
Yes.
made the conscious decision that I had to do something different because
Yes.
I was literally dying. So it wasn't just, oh, I feel like I am. There were things that were happening that my doctors were saying, if you don't do something different, you're
Yeah.
not going to be here very long.
And I think it's so, if I may just interject really quickly, because I work with women, as you probably do as well,
Mhm.
who are in relationships with men who are showing up as narcissists.
Mhm.
All of them don't have a diagnosis from the military, but
Mhm.
sometimes you don't need that. And
Mhm.
so I love what you said about, because essentially what he was saying, and I'm sure that many of these men have said this to their women, maybe not in those exact words, but in so
Mm.
many ways and in some of their actions, is I want to keep on controlling you. I want to keep on gaslighting you, and I want you to eat it up like it's chocolate and leave me
Mhm.
be. Leave me to
Mhm.
do this.
Well, it works well for them. It
Yes.
works very well for them. They're getting everything they need, everything they want, and they don't have to do anything other than be entitled, be controlling, be demeaning, and in little ways, right? That I
Mhm.
mean, I was married 23 years, and don't get me wrong, even after it's over, there are moments where I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, I was a good wife."
Yeah.
Like, why couldn't that just work out?
That couldn't have been
Because
enough
right, why couldn't it have been enough? I think it was maybe more than enough. It might have been too much for the person
for
to handle.
in yeah, I get where you're saying, what
Yeah.
you're saying with that.
Yeah, because
Because
they
when you
yeah.
are that good wife, it makes it harder for them to be who they actually are showing up as.
Mhm.
Did I say that? Mm.
Absolutely. It was
Ooh,
too
girl,
much.
yeah, yeah.
It was too much.
What advice would you give to a woman who is in a situation like yours and the person is not willing to work on a different
Well,
scenario?
if
Let's
you're willing to, if you want to stay in that, then you have to be in therapy constantly.
Yes, indeed.
Because every week you're going to need to really pull apart what is happening to you. Not what they're doing to you, but what's happening to your mind, your body, your spirit, your
Right.
soul, so that you can determine how you set the appropriate boundaries, and then you match their energy where you need to match their energy. That takes work to do that, and you
Mm,
need somebody to walk you through how that gets done. I walk a number of people through that on a regular basis and help them understand that if you are choosing to be in this space, you're going to have to understand when you're being gaslit, and then be able to turn that around so you recognize that it's not you. I understand that this is what you want. I understand that this is not something that works at this moment. We'll come back to this at another time.
mm.
Most of the time, if you're not in therapy, you're not gonna be able to say that. You're gonna be a ball
You're
of
caught.
tears
You're caught in it.
trying to figure out what you did wrong,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Yeah, um, and so it's really important to get that therapy. If you're deciding that you're gonna walk away from it, it's gonna be so challenging, so you're gonna have to be in therapy, and you're gonna need a great support system
mm-hmm.
because
Yes.
they will pull you back in, pull you back
Right,
in, pull you
right.
back
And
in.
one of the things that they try to do is pull you away from that support system. So you're
Mhm,
out here on your own.
mhm.
And
Oh, mine turned my support system against me.
that's magic. They do work magic, don't
Oh
they?
my goodness,
Mm,
turned them against me, but thankfully, I had a whole separate system that wasn't blood. So he turned my blood against me,
mhm.
the
Oh,
ones that were closest to me. Some of them woke up, took them a minute, but they woke up.
mhm,
But I had another support system that was my sisters who weren't my blood,
mhm.
who were just like, "Oh, no, ma'am, whatever you this is the direction we're going in." And to this day, he still tries to interject, and they are right there, Johnny on the spot. And our kids knew well before I did
Mhm, mhm.
that
Wow.
when I told them I was getting a divorce, they were like, "Oh my god, we were wondering when this is gonna happen. Thank you." And I was shocked.
Yeah. Well, the beauty is that you were able to come out of that not unscathed,
Mm-mm.
but to find wellness and healing and the help that you
Absolutely. And
needed.
it's a journey.
And
It's a journey
absolutely.
because I
And
feel for
that's
him. I do feel
mhm,
for him. I think it must be a tough existence not having someone to help him manage in the way I did, because
mhm,
I could tell you some things. I walked him through life like you
right.
wouldn't believe for 23 years.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, I mean, even the title is that the long path to mental health, and the fact that it in communities of color, it has been the road less traveled. But
Mhm.
now, because of the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, the work that many of our sisters and brothers, we got to see a few of our brothers in London, that
Mhm.
we are doing, it just gets better and better every single day
Yeah.
when one other, you know, person of color, African American, Black person signs the dotted line on that master's
Mhm.
degree in counseling and goes and
Mhm.
gets that degree. And then even some who take it further, like yourself, and get their doctorate. And not just in the mental health clinical pieces that we
Mhm.
get to do, but I know that you also coach.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the reasons I went and got my doctorate is because I wanted to do counseling, education, and supervision.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to me that I'm helping to bring out a new generation of culturally competent therapists. And
Absolutely.
that for me begins with cultural humility, that
Yes.
ability to be completely engaged with who you are and what your biases really are. So
Mm,
my dissertation was about looking at the socially acceptable responses on the MAX, which is the Multicultural Awareness, Knowledge, and Skills Survey that
mm-hmm.
we do, that's supposed to tell all clinicians how culturally competent they are. So looking at the socially acceptable responses that are given on that assessment and comparing it to those exact same people doing the implicit bias assessment for
Oh.
Harvard University.
Ooh, and what did
Now,
that look like?
just what you think. It
Okay.
literally said, when I take this survey that is with these socially acceptable responses, I am glowing. I have a 95, 96, 98% as
Mhm.
being culturally competent. But when I do this implicit association assessment, where all I get is pictures of people in front of me and words in front of me as it pertains to these pictures being switched in and out, suddenly it plummets,
Mhm.
plummets. And what we're finding is that those biases show up in the microaggressions, in the
Absolutely.
way you diagnose or misdiagnose those who are not like you.
Right, right.
Because a lot of black women who are depressed are high achievers. And you'd be like, oh, girl, you'll be fine. You got plenty of resilience. But we don't want to be told we're strong when
Exactly,
we're hurting. But you can't
exactly,
hear that we're hurting because you have finished your master's degree, you're
exactly.
running your own company, you run a nonprofit, you're on 4 boards, you got 4 kids, and you're managing your 4 children, and 2 of them are in college, and you got a husband that's.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
But if I go in your house, the dishes aren't getting done and the laundry is piling up and
Mhm.
you don't have great relationships with your family and you're missing out on opportunities to have fun in life.
Yes, yes. Don't we see them walking right in? And hey, Kim Anthony says, "Yep, she knows
Mhm.
just what we're talking about." And Terry says, "Hey, Soror," she says, "Ain't nothing like God giving you resilience."
Oh
Mm.
my goodness.
And if it weren't for that, hello, what we say, but God, girl, she said,
All day. And
all
here's
day.
the thing, in my practice, I don't advertise as being faith-based, but I am. I mean,
Absolutely.
I
Hmm.
I am faith-based as an individual. So then we go through this, well, how do you keep you out of your practice and how you treat people walk in the door? The minute that they demonstrate to me that they too are faith-based and that they would like to be able to incorporate the word into what we're talking about, oh baby, let's go.
Let's
I
go.
got you.
I love it. Absolutely. I always, it's like the minute I hear any little inkling, any word, it's like, let's do this. And
Mhm.
I am so free in that moment to be
Mhm.
able to do that and to really go there, because that's who we are. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think being able to recognize that you
Mhm.
can do both. You don't have to have
Right.
one without the other, because I used to get the comments, well, girl, I just pray. Well, it's like, me too.
Mhm.
Um, and God made therapists too, y'all. You know,
And here's the thing that I love about it. You know, Jesus had 12 helpers.
boom.
12. Let's
Right.
think
What does
about
the
this
Bible
for a
say
moment.
about many counselors?
So if he needed 12 for the work he was doing, how many do you
Okay.
need for the work you're doing?
Exactly.
Helpers. That's all we're talking about. You'll go to your
Absolutely.
doctor if there's diabetes, you'll go for heart disease, you'll go for so if you okay, let me say how I want to say this, Father. If you went for mental health and emotional health, you might not have to
Have to
have
go. Boom, boom.
diabetes.
I was
You
going
might
there.
not have to have the heart disease, the high blood pressure, and so forth. Why? Because you're emotionally regulated.
Right.
And then
Full
when you're
on
emotionally
wellness.
regulated, you're not feeding yourself the, oh, there we
Absolutely.
go. So
Absolutely.
now you're feeding your mind, your body, your soul a lot more healthily,
Right.
both from a mental health perspective and a physical health perspective. And now we've eliminated a couple of the helpers that you need.
Right. Exactly. It's so true. It's so true. So this opportunity to get to do the work that we get to do and the
Mm.
way that we get to do it is so the best. And so I want to ask you, what is the best part of it for you?
Oh, impact,
Yeah.
impact. I happened to be at an event this past weekend that had nothing to do with mental health except for the fact that it was some self care because it was a fashion show. So
Oh, I
for
love
me,
it.
that was self care.
Yes, indeed.
And a young man walked up to me and he says, Doc, you know, this community knows you like crazy and you're always on a panel or talking to some people about various things. And, you've reached the pinnacle of your success. When did you know you'd reached it? And I looked at him and I said, I haven't. And he said, no, 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 no. And so ran down a few other things. I said, no, you don't understand. For me, being known is not the success. For me, the impact on people is the level of success.
Mhm.
Now, I may not see the numbers in the divorce rate tick down because we have the highest in the country, the highest across the South, and the highest across religion. The
Mm,
Black church,
mm.
okay?
Wow.
The highest rate of divorce exists within our community. So in my lifetime, I might not see that tick down from the 30% that I know is national, from the
Mhm,
19% that I know that's across religions, or from the 20% that I know is in this across the South. I might not get to see that.
mhm.
But if I can see 5, 10, 15, 20 families that say, oh my goodness, the way that you helped us stay together
Yes.
so that we could be emotionally and mentally well. Now we can build that generational wealth.
Yes.
And now we can leave something to our children that they know what to do with.
Mm,
That for me is the pinnacle of success.
I love.
That's where I feel the most accomplished,
Mhm.
self
I
actualized.
I love that. That
Hmm.
is so beautiful. So I think that hearing you say that, it becomes it's extremely clear why you do what you do, why you were chosen to do what
Hmm.
you do, and how you do it so well, how and why
Thank you.
you do it and do it so
Yeah.
well. And I think
Purpose.
that yes, and I love that you are involved with helping some of the future generations of helpers come about along their
Hmm.
journey. I do the same. I'm a clinical supervisor, a practicum supervisor for Brandman, formerly Brandman, now UMass Global University. And just that, I love that so much, being
Hmm.
able to pour what I know and even what I haven't yet figured out, because of the transparency. And that is sometimes you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know all the things, but
Mm-mm.
you have, even as a counselor, many counselors, many
Mm-hmm.
consultants that you can go to and uh, and pick up the pieces that might be missing from your own part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Hence, the Not Your Typical Psychotherapy Conference where you and I met.
Right.
I think that community that is built around that principle of
Mm.
we're not your typical psychotherapist.
No,
We
no,
can
you're
go
not
to
gonna walk in my office and I just go, hmm,
exactly.
oh,
Oh no, we got
say that
to
say
say.
more. No, no. I tell my clients all the time, I say, there are gonna be days when you walk out of here mad at me, and that's okay. I just say, if you want to see change, because therapy is about change, then come on back. I'll
Yeah,
be right here next time. Come on back.
absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes I tell people all the time, I sometimes have to tell off my couples. Like, are we doing this? Because this is not what I do. So if y'all come here to do all of that, you're in the wrong place. So
And
I'm
someone
gonna
asked me
go.
one time,
I'm
they
gonna
said,
go, and
right,
you come on back
do
next
you
time
do the
if you
same
want to
thing
do
with
this
black
right.
couples as you do with white couples? And I said, yes. And they said, but there's certain things that you can't say to them. I say, oh, I see what
Oh,
you're saying. Okay. So what it is that I have the same principles, but every couple is spoken to differently. It's
yes,
not about race.
right.
It's about what the couple can handle, right?
Exactly. And you
So
know who you can say that to and who you cannot. Absolutely.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Being known is not the success. Being someone who has made an impact is how we are to measure real success and how I feel the most accomplished. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Janelle Perkins Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Mr. Seals, this is great information. I'm going to share this on Facebook. Well, thank you, kind sir. We
It's
appreciate that.
wonderful.
Always appreciate that. So we're wrapping up here.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get the Boss Talkers familiar with where they can find you. We're going to pick the
Mm-hmm.
book up one more time. But one of the other things that I like to do is I like to ask my Boss Talker guests to give us one thing that you'd like to leave the Boss Talkers with. We have married people out there, we have single people out there, um, people of color,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise. So what nuggets would you like to
Mm.
drop tonight for the Boss Talkers?
Yeah, I think the biggest one has to do with intimacy, right? I think that we have to think of intimacy as being pleasure over performance.
Ooh, I love it.
And the moment that you recognize that even when you're in the cognitive space, an emotional space, the spiritual space, and especially the physical space, when you think about what in this moment is going to bring us the greatest pleasure
Mhm.
over performance, practice that which brings you pleasure.
Mm, I love that. Practice that which brings you pleasure. I'm good at that. I love it. So, Dr. Chanel, uh, you are a consultant on TV One's hit show Fatal Attraction.
Mhm.
You have been featured in Skirt Magazine, Newsweek, Charleston Magazine, and Vice Magazine. You have been seen on the Afro News Chicken Box. I want to know about that. Divorce.com, Fox 24 Charleston, Low Country Live, Reese G, Black Family Table Talk, Growth State of Mind, and Her Point of View. Podcasts and organizations alike seek you for your expertise on topics ranging from cultural immersion and humility, love that, emotional intelligence and resilience, personality disorders, military trauma, racial anxiety and depression, and much more. Your lived experience with blended families, adoption, divorce, family personality disorders are key to your ability to bring research to life.
Mhm.
So as the young man who you ran into at the fashion show mentioned, you have a beautiful body of work out there. You have done
Mhm.
quite a bit. And so I'd like for you to just touch on really quickly, how do you leverage what
Mm.
you do as an expert? How do you leverage that to find that kind of visibility and to parlay that expertise into all these opportunities, because
Mm,
that's one of the things on Boss Talk. We talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about visibility, we talk about next leveling and leveling up. So can
mhm.
you give us briefly something on that?
10x is better than 2x. If you're
Ooh,
gonna do a thing, do it at the 10x level, not the 2x level.
I like it.
So you have to pour into whatever activity it is at the highest possible level of excellence that you can give it. 10x is easier than 2x.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Say that. Say why.
10x is easier than 2x. It's a book. Um, oh my goodness.
I've seen it, but
I
talk the
can't.
principle. Say the
Yes.
principle. I can't
So
think of its name either. Go ahead.
yes. So basically what it means is literally that if you are doing something on a smaller level, and I'll give you an example. When I first started out, I did my own social media, I did my own graphics and flyers and all this stuff. And then one day I said, this makes no sense. I'm not getting to the work that I need to be doing. So I hired a professional who was the ultimate professional, worked my butt off eating beanies and weenies instead of the steak I was eating when I was doing it at 2x. And then I paid that person to do it at 10x. And it was excellent. And now I can go do the things that I need to be doing. And that helped my
Delegation.
business to grow exponentially. PR
Delegation.
firm, just do it. Go for it.
I love it. I love it. So it's investing in yourself.
Mhm.
And we invest in so much else. Why not us?
You
Right?
get your nails done.
Hello, somebody. I love it. I love it. I do. Well, let's get the folks knowing where they can find you. So we're going to put
Absolutely.
up your things. So go ahead and let's get
So
that up there right now. But go
you
ahead
want
and
me to
say
say
that.
them or how
Yeah,
you
go
want me? Okay. So I am on TikTok at Dr. That's Dr. dot Janelle, JeanNellelLMFT on TikTok. I get a little funny on that one every now and again. And then there are all the other ones. TMI Counseling and Coaching is my practice, and Dr. Janelle is my brand. And you'll find me all over the place talking about relationships, mental health and relationships, mental health and sexual health, the whole 9 yards. Because the full person has to come to the table in order to be authentically available to be in a
ahead.
relationship.
I love it. I love it. So y'all go ahead, take a screenshot, copy and paste that so that you can stay abreast of what Dr. Janelle is doing in the whole wide world. And let's see what they're saying. Thank you, Dr. Perkins. This was a very deep discussion, most over my head, but I
Absolutely.
loved it.
We'll bring it down to earth. We'll bring it
That
down to
is
earth.
so awesome. Risa says, say it, love it, need to open my can of beanie weenies now. Absolutely. And Terry Mann says, now that makes sense. 2x versus 10x. Yes,
Hmm.
indeed. Absolutely. Well, I just want to say once again, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being on tonight and sharing from your heart and your head. I love both.
You're most welcome.
And
Enjoyed it.
y'all, this has once again been Boss Talk with your girl, Shawn LaRae, and that uh, is bold, one of a kind, sensational superstars, and that's you. So take a look right there and copy and paste all the links there. This is where you can find me. If you need therapy, go to livinglovedhealing.org. If you need coaching, go to livinglovedcoaching.com. If you need to just check out my Instagram and have some fun with me, on Facebook, the same. And check out our nonprofit at www.wjq Center, the William Joseph Brinkley Center for Cultural Affirmation. And it's time.
One of a kind.
So groove out with me, and I will see you all back here next week on Wednesday at 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So do the math or somewhere else, and we'll see you then. Be well, good love, and shalom, y'all.